Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwayne McFarland.
All across the fantasy universe, welcome everybody to the Fantasy Football Hustle, powered by Pro Football Focus. We're back. You're back. Welcome in, everybody. It's going to be a good time. I'm Brian Drake of FightingChanceFantasy.com, joined, of course, by my main man. It's the analytical assassin, PFF Senior Fantasy Analyst, Mr. Dwayne McFarland. How are you, Dwayne? Good to get back in touch with you here. It's been a second.
I know, man. I know our schedules have been a bit hectic between family stuff, vacations, but yeah, man, I'm always excited for us to be doing the hustle. Like this is how we started, man. So I can't wait.
Yeah, and you've been dropping some big time knowledge over at PFF.com. And as we prepare for Memorial Day, folks, you know that means two things. Number one, summer's here, so break out that Speedo. And number two, fantasy football is on its way. So what we're going to do today is give you a snapshot of the current top 36 wide receivers in Dwayne's rankings. And we're going to kind of counterbalance that with FFPC Slim Best Ball ADP. Of course, thanks so much to our good pal Darren Armani at FantasyMojo.com for providing us with that ADP. If you love high-stakes fantasy football, and we know so many of you guys who listen to this show do, go over to FantasyMojo.com. Check out his work there. So we'll piggyback that with Dwayne's statistical analysis at PFF.com, which, by the way, Dwayne, I don't know if folks know this. They should if they're at PFF.com every day, but you just dropped your 2022 wide receiver rankings and tier articles. It's free, but once that paywall kicks in, guys are going to have to get a subscription. We're going to save you 25%. Use promo code HUSTLE. Save that 25%. You get access to Dwayne's content. Every year I get DMs at FF Hustle. How do I get Dwayne's tiers? How do I get Dwayne's rankings? How do I get Dwayne to draft for me? This is what you do. Go to PFF.com. Use promo code HUSTLE. Save 25%. Player grades, betting info, all the incredible writers over there. You're going to fall in love with it. Again, PFF.com, promo code HUSTLE. You're doing killer work over there, man. And today is just the tip of the iceberg. Tell people what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, I have time, when you're doing this full time, you have the ability to not only just like think through these things and like deploy them for yourself, but to really think about how can you take the lessons that you've learned through fantasy football, over the years of drafting, and because that's ultimately what it comes down to right now. We're really focused on drafting the best teams that we can. Mm-hmm. But then taking this data and all these things that we've got at Pro Football Focus that you can't necessarily get right everywhere else. And then how do we turn that into something actionable for folks? So really what I wanted to do was up my game, one, in data visualizations from a standpoint of, I'm not trying to give everybody some cool like radar like type visual or something. We're working on some things like that, but like minimum viable, I wanted to be able to give people, all right, here are the receivers. Here are the areas that I care about for receiver, and like, here's how they all stack up, and using that information to really create tiers and doing it kind of with a heat map type format, so that people can easily see like why players are placing in the tiers that they're in. Not just because, we think there's a point break here. No, it's because the profile of the receivers are the same. And what this helps you do, it helps you, one, spot values against ADP. Two, it helps you spot arbitrage plays, like guys that you're like, wow, when I look at their profile, it actually looks just like one of the guys in the top 12, but they're going at pick 24. Right? That's something that you would want to really be able to see and understand, because that helps you start to identify potential breakout players in the future. The other thing that I really like to look at, beyond just the player's talent, like, is the situation. So you could have a player that checks all the boxes. They can create targets or demand targets, right? We believe that targets are earned. And then we can also see that, once they are targeted, they're badass with the ball in their hand, right? They can work all areas of the field. They can attack deep. They can create yak after the catch. That leads to explosive plays. They're used inside the red zone by their team, so they have a profile to score touchdowns. And then the last part is the environment, right? Where they land. And so the folks that are watching this right now on YouTube, you can see I've actually put these little handy dandy stickers at the top, like these notes. of what I'm trying to do with each one of these sections, right? So the first question is, does the receiver generate targets? Second, can the receiver generate yards and touchdowns with said targets? Because just because you can get targets, that doesn't mean it's all equal, right? Juju Smith-Schuster has a low ADOT. His yards after the catch is not very good anymore. Now, he does get to play in the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, so that's worth something. But at the end of the day, like a Juju Smith-Schuster target, even though it's from Patrick Mahomes, is not as good as what Jamar Chase is going to do with his targets, because he is actually, if you look across the whole board, he's the only receiver to score so highly in deep target percentage rate and yards after the catch. So this is a guy that can attack every level of the field, and he can create on his own after the catch. So, and then that last component really is about the team, the environment, where you're at. Is it a team that's going to pass a lot? Do you have a lot of challenges on the depth chart as far as, competing for targets? And one easy way to do that is look at your teammates and say, well, how many of your teammates are being drafted inside the top 36 at receiver at ADP right now? And how many tight ends are being taken in the top 12? Adding those two things together. And so for Justin Jefferson at the very top, it's just him. Like Adam Thielen is nearly there. He's like 38 or something like that right now. So he's nearly a 2. It's borderline. But Irv Smith is way down. Yet we still are okay with Kirk Cousins. He's a QB 16. Team projected wins are pretty good. So like Justin Jefferson is checking like all of these boxes across the board. So again, it's like all about demanding targets. What can you do with the targets? And then how can the team environment really either help more volume, or can it help you be really more efficient, right, as a player based on the quarterback you're playing with, quality of the team?
I love this stuff. And I actually clipped a piece of what you wrote and I DM'd it to you because I was so into it, where you just wrote a very simplistic piece. It says, quote, "The ultimate options are receivers who demand targets at all levels of the field and make plays after the catch on winning pass-heavy teams. But after that, every tier is some variation of strength versus weakness in the profile." This is the simplest form of fantasy football. And yet, over and over, year after year, we forget this. And we get so cute in fantasy football with our analytics and our hot takes and our, flag plants, that we just don't say, give me the damn best players on the best offenses with the best quarterbacks who are going to score the points. It's not that hard. That's sometimes why the guy who hasn't done any research in your league shows up. You go, how did this guy make the playoffs? Well, no shit. He just drafted a bunch of good players. Speaking of drafts, and you folks out there might really like this. So a little announcement, very, very special. All of you guys probably know Scott Fish, right? He runs the Scott Fish Bowl, hugely popular league. Every analyst in the world is in it. Everybody's trying to get into it. Scott Fish Bowl 13 this year, I believe. Well, our good buddy Scott, who I did meet last year in person at the Fantasy Football Expo, has given the Hustle one entry to give away for 2022. That's right. We're giving away a spot in the Scott Fish Bowl this year, but it's not as easy as just, hey, we're going to pick a friend and do whatever. We want this to go to someone who really helps out in their community, because that's what the Scott Fish Bowl is all about. It's all about charity. So what we're looking for here, someone who works with youth sports. You can be a coach. You can be some kind of volunteer, a team mom, an official, a league president. I don't care what you're doing. DM us at FF Hustle on Twitter or Instagram and tell us why this person deserves a spot. In the next week or two, we'll go out, we'll pick somebody, and they're going to gain entry to the Scott Fish Bowl. So thanks again to Scott. So again, at FF Hustle, DM us on Twitter or Instagram and nominate someone. Hell, nominate yourself. I don't care. But we want to put somebody into the Scott Fish Bowl who's actually doing something for kids, because Lord knows, Dwayne, do you see all these things online where it's like, somebody's yelling at an official or fighting with a coach in a parking lot? It drives me crazy. If you're a parent, shut up. You were probably terrible at sports when you were a kid. Nobody wants to hear your mouth. Just sit there and watch little, Jimmy strike out 4 times. Okay.
I've been there. Like, I've had a parent coming across the field when I was coaching for my kids and youth, just screaming and yelling and berating the officials. Like, and I had to turn, and I knew this person, but I had to turn them around, like, and, basically protect like the officials from like this person coming. And then this person wanted to have a fight with me. And I was thinking, like, we're talking about like 10-year-olds here in a rec league and we're losing our minds. Like what are we teaching our kids? So yeah, I love the idea of really trying to reward, people in the community. They're trying to teach the kids the right thing, and just stepping forward, right? And being willing to coach. Coaching's a big commitment. It's a big commitment. It takes a lot of your time. Like I did it more when I was younger, when my jobs were easier. And as I got older into more complex jobs that took more time, I didn't do it as much, so that was a trade-off I had to make later, in life. But yeah, I love what we're doing. And of course we love Scott Fish. Scott Fish is awesome.
Yeah. And maybe you'll get to meet him this year out at the FF Expo, because you're going to be out there, I believe, right? Roomy?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Dwayne and I sharing a room.
Playing poker.
Yeah. With our good buddy Drew Davenport running the poker tournament there. So if that wasn't enough, before we kick things off here, you think the fun's going to stop? No, we're still in a given mood here on the hustle. We're about to give away some cash. Well, figuratively, I guess. Over at Underdog Fantasy, we are matching initial signups up to $100. It's so simple. Go to underdogfantasy.com, sign up, use promo code HUSTLE, and whatever you deposit, as long as you're a first-time user, up to $100, Dwayne and I are going to double it. See, we're nice guys like that. You have a shot at $10 million in prizes for Best Ball Mania 3, including $3 million to the winner. Now, that's the biggest prize pool, I think, in fantasy football history, $3 million. Don't worry, Dwayne and I are going to be doing lots of Best Ball Mania 3 drafts as the summer rolls on for Underdog, because we want to win some of that cash too. Promo code HUSTLE, sign up at Underdog. Let's all get rich together. All right, Dwayne, enough of the pleasantries. I know we're really excited to have our show back here, actually recording around lunchtime. It's so fun to see the guys pop in the chat room that we don't often see when we record at night. Our pals over the 5 Yard Rush and Toronto Dave, and it's a good crew here. So if you're watching us on YouTube, please make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Helps us out. It goes a long way. So we're at the point of the year, Dwayne. People are starting to pay more attention to fantasy. NFL drafts behind us. The schedule's now set. We can really start focusing on ADP and honing our crafts in these draft rooms. So today's show is going to be perfect for those of us who are starting to take the temperature of draft rooms. We prepare for our upcoming leagues. At this point in the early summer, first of all, how are you feeling about these wide receivers in the player pool? Kind of give our audience a big picture thought on the wide receiver marketplace today as you head into drafts, because that's what we're focusing on today. It's your top 36 wide receivers.
Well, anyone that's looking at the screen share can see right away, I only have 8 receivers ranked as tier 1 receivers. So that right off the bat is telling you something. I don't want to force. So what I'm trying to do is look at these historical profiles, right, and use them to help us figure out like who we should be targeting this summer. And there's not 12 to get to. And honestly, to be honest, like I forced it for tier 2. Like I could have cut tier 2 off early. And the problem at the big level, at the macro level, like really comes down to a lot of micro level things. So for example, Deontay Johnson, while Ben Roethlisberger is not a great quarterback, like he fit perfectly with Ben, right? Because it was quick, got to get the ball out. Well, where'd Deontay work? Short and intermediate routes. We don't know what that's going to look like with Mitch Trubisky, who's going to hold on to the ball longer, not as much of a timing passer. Could be this, or you're dealing with a rookie in Kenny Pickett, right? DJ Moore. Well, we already saw DJ Moore's a great talent, but he's still dealing with Sam Darnold. They didn't really upgrade the quarterback room. They added Matt Corral in the 3rd round. DK Metcalf loses Russell Wilson. Terry McLaurin does pick up Carson Wentz, but still in an offense that's not going to be very good. And Wentz wasn't that great last year. So that's an example of a bunch of situations that either, that pretty much just got worse. For DJ Moore, it's static, but for DK Metcalf and for Terry McLaurin, it's static. But for DK Metcalf and Deontay Johnson, like young talents, guys we want to love, guys we want to draft, man, their situation just got so much worse. You look at AJ Brown, moves teams. But he didn't land with the next team he landed with is a similar type profile team. The Eagles are run heavy. They're not as run heavy as Tennessee. Like we don't have a track record of, multiple years like Mike Vrabel, but it still really wasn't a great landing spot. Jalen Waddle picked up competition from Tyreque Hill. Tyreque Hill landed on a team where now he's got to deal with Jalen Waddle and they're going to run the ball more. So it's like all these things coming together. There are a lot of not necessarily, it's all relative, right? But the landing spots and the way everything shaked out over the offseason, there are a ton of questions at receiver. Last year at receiver, in the 4th and 5th rounds, well, actually 5th and 6th rounds, by the time we got to August and September, you were getting guys like Jamar Chase, We don't have quite the same profile of a lot of these players as what we had last year in the middle rounds. And so I think what that's going to create, it's just going to create a scenario where you're going to have certain, depending on the way you like to value players. Like if you just want to go all in on talent and say you don't care about Sam Darnold, you still love DJ Moore, that's great, but you're not going to have as much confidence as you had last year. Last year, we hadn't seen Sam Darnold with DJ Moore, and we thought, well, maybe there's something there. So it just creates the situation where in the middle rounds, I think there's going to be a lot of volatility in how these picks play out in our fantasy season.
So let's start.
There's always volatility, but more than normal.
Yeah. Let's start at the top here. And your 1A tier mirrors the top 3 guys off the board in FFPC ADP. That's Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson. You don't necessarily have them in that order. You have Jefferson, Kupp, Chase. But here's what I want to ask you, because this is a spot where if I'm looking at ADP and I now see Cooper Kupp at the 1-3 and these wide receivers, 1-5, 1-6, 1-7, that might be a little earlier than the typical fantasy player listening to this show likes to take a wide receiver. They might be scared off. They're going, wait a minute, am I really going to pull the trigger on a wide receiver here? But to me, I'm not trying to necessarily draft the wide receiver 1. I just want someone who's consistent. They have a high floor, massive ceiling, and they're likely going to finish in the top 7. All 3 of these guys give me that. In your latest article at pff.com, like I just said, this is your 1A tier, as you put it, talented guys in great situations, AKA the wide receiver gods, as you put it. So calm the nerves of our listeners here about taking a wide receiver that early in your draft with these 3 guys.
Well, one, we know receivers get hurt less. So you get some stability, right? Just by that alone, against running back. I'm taking one of these 3 receivers or Jonathan Taylor, and with some Christian McCaffrey sprinkled in. Those will be my first 5 picks off the board. Like every draft, it'll be one of those 2 running backs or one of these 3 receivers. Now, if I all of a sudden get way overweight, I may throw in a Derrick Henry here or there, right? Do some different things, just to hedge. But as I'm starting draft season, I would feel confident in these guys. They check every single box that we want to see. Justin Jefferson going into year 3, target share last year, 27%. Targets per route run don't matter as much if we already know target share. Targets per route run really comes in if a player missed a lot of games like AJ Brown, and we just want to know, well, crap, when he was on the field, did he show enough? Or players that, maybe ascending, and we want to know, oh, wow, they're going to have more opportunity to run more routes this year. What could that potentially translate to for target share? And then there's yards per route run, and then there's touchdowns. You get your deep percentage, yak, explosiveness. So the way I think about this is, again, creating the targets, but then what can you do with the targets? And these guys check all the boxes. I mean, Justin Jefferson's yak is good. He creates a lot of explosive plays. Those are your targets that you convert into receptions of 15 plus yards or more. Jamar Chase does the same thing. So Jamar Chase, notice, like, his target share is only 22% last year, but look at his yak and look at his deep target percentage and his explosive plays. Like, they're all elite. And so he's also only 22 and a half years old. So we can project, that he's going to continue to grow. Like Jamar Chase, it won't surprise us if he has a 25% target share this year, even though he has a crowded offense. But then when you keep going to the right, when you look at Chase, we love his quarterback. Joe Burrow's ADP is 5, right? So that's something like giving us even more confidence and feeling good about Jamar Chase, even though he has target competition. We think he's going to be in a good offense. And so does Vegas. 10 plus wins, projected right now over on DraftKings Sportsbook. And only two Bengals are projected inside the top 36 wide receivers and tight ends. Obviously, Jamar Chase is one of those. The other is T. Higgins. So again, like if we weren't projecting the volume to be there in the passing game, and you have another person you're having to split targets with, that's a bigger deal. But everything checks off, right, as blues pretty much for Jamar Chase. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I hope folks are checking in on the YouTube channel. I know so many of our listeners just listen on a podcast platform, and we appreciate that. But you can actually see this live right on the YouTube page, and again over at pff.com. If you want to sign up, promo code HUSTLE. We're company men. We're gonna keep banging it out there for you. So that's 1A. Those are kind of no brainers. All right. Now we go to 1B, where this is CeeDee Lamb, Stephon Diggs, and Devonta Adams. Let me start here with CeeDee Lamb, who I'm higher on, I think, than most. I think people are really overlooking. Remember last year, Dwayne, you couldn't go to Twitter without finding some obnoxious CeeDee Lamb video of him making a catch in training camp or whatever. Everybody was so high on him. And then, the season plays out and everyone's kind of like, whatever, CeeDee Lamb. Well, Amari Cooper and his 104 targets are gone. You've got Michael Gallup, and he's still recovering from an injury. So it's CeeDee Lamb, Dalton Schultz. You've got, the bevy of running backs they got there and a couple of rookies. You're telling me CeeDee Lamb isn't going to see double-digit targets nearly every week from Dak Prescott, who's another year healthier? I love CeeDee Lamb this year. I think he's going to be outstanding.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and so the reason some people may not want to project CeeDee Lamb this high is if you look at the tier above, with Jamar Chase, Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, his target share was only 18% last year. Now he did miss a game, so his targets per route run are at 22%. And that's where that stat can come in handy because Jamar Chase, a 21% targets per route run. Both players are similar ages. Chase 22.5 going into the season. CeeDee Lamb will be 23.4 years old. Projected targets per game, very similar, or dropbacks per game for their team, 39 for the Bengals, 41 for the Cowboys. Both players are dealing with one other teammate inside the top 36 or top 12 at wide receiver and tight end ADP. Both teams projected to win a lot of games. The Cowboys at 10.5. If you look at Jamar Chase at 10. So when I look at this, the most likely player that I think could climb into tier 1A by the time, this season is done, I would put my chip on CeeDee Lamb. The other two players, now he does have to take a step forward in the target share, but here's the thing. CeeDee Lamb, these last 2 years, he's only been out there for about 75% of the dropbacks. And he still put up wide receiver, top 24 wide receiver finishes both years, despite only being out there for 75% of the pass plays. Now, he's going to be out there not to 90 to 95% of the pass plays. An average wide receiver one is on the field 86% of the time their quarterback drops back to pass. So you can expect Lamb, even if he doesn't take a huge step forward, say he just still remains a 22% targets per route player and he doesn't take a jump to 25% because Amari Cooper left. And that can happen. Players do still have to earn their targets. You can't just automatically give them to them because someone leaves. But Lamb is on the right trajectory for us to continue, I think, to project growth. And now that you do have Amari Cooper moving on, he's the type of profile I'm willing to go ahead and bake more ceiling into where I think his targets could go. So if you look at him, for folks that, you're listening to the pod, blue is good when you hear us talk about blue versus more of a reddish color. Justin Jefferson is blue across the board. The next closest player is CeeDee Lamb. I mean, he grades slightly lower than Justin Jefferson in several things, but he's still blue across the board. So yeah, I absolutely love CeeDee Lamb, and I think there's a nice floor baked in, even if he doesn't take a step forward. Dallas has averaged 740 dropbacks per game over the last 2 years, if you were to put that in a 17-game season. So Lamb just bumping his routes up alone by 10 to 15% is going to generate new targets, even if he doesn't take a step forward, which he most likely will do. So I think there's a better floor than what people realize already baked into Lamb, just on the fact that he's going to be on the field more.
Stephon Diggs was a guy that some people were drafting as the number one overall wide receiver last year, if you remember. And I guess you could say he let people down. He finished as PPR wide receiver 7. So possibly you could be looking at getting a discount on Stephon Diggs this year in Buffalo. And, if you look at your article, you talk about how Josh Allen is this great environment now and the massive target share. And you have no more Cole Beasley, no more Emmanuel Sanders. We're going to see Gabe Davis step up a little bit. And they drafted a kid and they got Isaiah McKenzie and now a running back who might be able to catch the ball. But it still all flows through Stephon Diggs. And at an ADP of Stephon Diggs, wide receiver 5, he's going off, about pick 15. That's great value for a guy who could be the wide receiver 1.
Yeah, and he's technically going ahead of Lamb right now, so it's fine. If you're picking towards the turn at the end, on the turn, round 1 and 2, man, going Diggs and then Lamb back to back, I absolutely love. That is a phenomenal start. And so CeeDee Lamb, We like him for a lot of the same reasons we like Lamb. He's not as young, but when we look at the dropbacks projected per game, high passing volume, we know we've got a good quarterback, an elite quarterback really at this point, and Josh Allen. His quarterback ADP is first overall. Vegas projects him for 11.5 wins. The only thing that kind of caught my attention with Diggs was just the fact, and it could just be variance, but we had, a reduction. And so his 2 previous years, his yards per route run have been 2.68 and 2.51, really elite numbers, right? That would put him in tier 1A if he had repeated that. But he didn't. That fell to 1.90. His targets per route run, had a slight slip, but we still project him to be the number 1 option in Buffalo. So anyone that wants to rate Diggs, ahead of Lamb, I'm fine with it. And if you're drafting, you should take Diggs ahead because that gives you the best chance to get both players. You want to try to come away with Diggs and come away with Lamb at the turn. So both players that I love, if you guys that are able to follow along on YouTube or go back and check it out later, you'll be able to see it's also in the article. These charts are in the tiers article over at PFF, and you'll see that really the only thing sticking out is yards after the catch are not as great, and his explosive play rate and deep target rate were not as good. But what I will say with Diggs, I like Gabriel Davis. I do. I don't love Gabriel Davis. I like Dawson Knox okay. I don't think Dawson Knox is a great player when you look at his targets per route run. Basically, Davis and Knox. Well, really Knox, not as much Davis. Knox was carried along just by the fact that Buffalo runs an uber amount of plays. And that turned his low target rate actually into something equivalent, right, to a player that may get way more targets in an offense that runs less. And that's the beauty of these tiers. We're baking all of that stuff into it. But when you look at Diggs, even though his target competition says that the top 36, that there's 3 of them, which lights it up, like it makes it red compared to his peers across, these first few groups. I'm not that sold on Knox being someone that's going to take targets from Diggs. I'm also not sold on Gabriel Davis stealing targets from Diggs. I think they will get their targets, but Diggs still has a ceiling to hit a 30% target share. He's only 20. He'll be 28.8 years old this season. If he does that, he will finish as the wide receiver 1 overall.
Look at that. That's a hot take. That's the quote that will turn into a infographic and we'll put it out on Instagram.
That everyone will then, tell me I'm an idiot. Yes.
Well, I actually went out and did a little research and I dug up some dirt on Devonta Adams. Once in a blue moon, I get out there and I do some things in between, driving range sessions. So Devonta Adams, he's got an ADP of 2.1 here over at the FFPC. He was traded, we all know, from Green Bay to Las Vegas, now joins college teammate Derek Carr in what many think is an ideal situation. Not so fast, my friend, to quote the great Lee Corso. It's been since 2017 when Devonta Adams had another teammate with over 90 targets. I believe that was Jimmy Graham. And he heads to the Raiders, where both Waller and Renfro saw 90-plus targets last year. Waller's had seasons of 93, 145, and 117 targets. Renfro, 129, 77, and 71. Adams saw 169 targets last year in Green Bay. There's no way he even comes remotely close to those numbers in Vegas. So I don't think, number one, Derek Carr can support all of these guys, but I think people are really going to be let down by one or both of Adams and Waller.
Yeah, if I had to, choose, I'm more concerned about Hunter Renfro, like in his ability just because of where he earns targets. But everything you said is just true. But again, what we have to look to is, how much of a player's target share do they own versus just the competition on their team? I would say first is the player, then is the competition on the team. So the good thing for Devonta Adams is we're probably going to see an offense that's going to be ran similar to what McDaniel did with Brady, not what he did with Mac Jones. When we look at the offense, we look at the weapons they have. And I do think Derek Carr can support 3 weapons, not the same way a Tom Brady could. Derek Carr is a great quarterback to draft in fantasy football this year. I think you're going to see, and you can see it from my projected dropbacks per game. These do exclude overtime because we can't project overtime. So that's something that I've stripped out of the history that I've used to help create these projections for these players. But 39.1 is pretty good. It's blue, on our chart. The big thing with Adams is going back to his talent. His targets per route run over the last 3 seasons, 30%, 31%, 29%. You cannot do that if you suck. You can't do that just because Green Bay didn't have other good players. You can't do that just because you had Aaron Rodgers. You can do that because Devonta Adams is a badass. and he's a really good player. Now, he's going to his age 29.7 season. So, I mean, basically he's going to be 30, for a good portion of the season. He is changing teams. It's been a long time since he's played with Derek Carr. So I do think there's a lot of risk. And that's, look, again, the tiers manifest this for us. You can see his talent profile for targets, yards after the catch, explosive plays, touchdowns per route run, all look the same as Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, and Jamar Chase. What's changed? He's got more competition, like you just mentioned. Hunter Renfrow just misses the cutoff from making that number to the right around the ADPs, a 3 in column AO for those of you following along. You podcast folks are going, what the hell does that mean? So I'll try to do a better job. Team projected wins 8.5. Playing a division where you're going to have to throw the ball. You're going to play against Patrick Mahomes. You're going to play against Russell Wilson. You're going to play against Justin Herbert. You're not going to, and the Raiders don't have a defense. So I think there's enough quality there, but if we hadn't seen Devonta Adams move teams, where would he rank? He would be in tier 1. Absolutely. What's bumping him down are the things that you said. There's enough uncertainty that he is going to have to deal with more targets to other players. And we don't know. Like, he could still come up with a 28, 29% target share, and be fine. And those other guys get fed. There's lots of ways in the range of outcomes this could play out. But most likely, to your point, he is going to have to take a little bit of a step back, right? He'll probably be like a 26, 25% target share guy, which will still be really good if you compare him to all the other guys that we're looking at, in these tiers up top. That would still rank as one of the better players.
So Deebo Samuel is going to be a polarizing guy come draft season. Now, he finished last year as wide receiver 3, partially on the back of, I believe, 8 rushing touchdowns. And I stole this from Marvin Eloquin, a guy I follow on Twitter, works over at Fantasy Footballers, talking about Deebo's target share in last year, weeks 1 through 9, 32% target share, right? Let's go down to weeks 10 through 18. His rushing share, 19.7. So his total opportunity share, basically this is the point of the tweet, weeks 1 through 9, and 10 through 18 was the same, 19% for both weeks. It's just the first half of the season he was receiving, the second half of the season he was rushing. I don't necessarily think, because of all the blow up we've seen from Deebo in social media over the past month or two, that he's going to be running the rock like he did at the end of last year. Does that change how you view Deebo, Dwayne, if you know he's not going to be getting those rushing opportunities, or maybe his rushing opportunities will be, I don't want to say a little more premium, but he's not going to be getting 1st and 10 up the gut carries?
It makes me like him more, actually, because if you're playing in a PPR league, you want the receptions. If you're playing in a half PPR league, right, you want the receptions. They're worth more than a carry. So just looking at Deebo, the way I look at it is early on in the season, and I'll just pull this down here. Why the hell not? People can, if you're watching along.
Dwayne's dropping in new charts on top of other charts.
Just ignore the fact that this here, receiving utilization. That way, whoever we pull into this chart will be fine. But anyway, so we are talking about Deebo, and looking early on, just like what you were talking about. Like, look, that's really where some of these huge weeks came in, when he was actually getting the targets. Right, the fantasy finishes were really good early on. They were okay later, but to your point, he was kind of living in this dangerous zone of, can this guy really keep doing what he's doing, on the ground? And I think that's a good question. But I think based on everything that's going on, I don't think we're going to see Deebo work in the backfield as much. Now that is me, projecting, but that's what we're in the business of having to project. So I think you see the Tyrion Davis-Price addition. I think they can give more work to Elijah Mitchell, but Deebo clearly, with the work that's going on with his agent, he wants to be seen as a receiver, and he wants to be paid as a receiver, which I think ultimately, is a good thing for fantasy football. Now, what you just mentioned is a problem. So look at Deebo. Everything about him, his target share, his targets per route run, his yards per route run are freaking nuts. Touchdowns per route run, not as good. That's where his touchdowns do step in. But look at his yak, man. Deebo's yards after the catch, 10.2, is what turns a lot of other players into just, a neutral color on the graph that would otherwise also be blue. Because Deebo Samuel, that's an insane number. The year before it was 10.8. So we can't say it's not sustainable. I think eventually that has to come down some. But his explosive play rate, Drake, 32% of his targets went for 15 yards or more, and his ADOT was only 7.8. Average depth of target of 7.8. Didn't just play in the slot, worked outside. So yeah, love him. The problem, this is an offense that we know Kyle Shanahan wants to run the ball. And so they only project for 35 dropbacks per game. That is one of the bottom in my projections. And he's got two teammates that go inside, or he's got one teammate that goes inside the top 12 at tight end and George Kittle, and Brandon Ayuk just misses going inside the top 36 at ADP. And in some drafts, you will see Brandon Ayuk go in that top 36. So the reason Debo does not make one of the two tiers above is the situation he plays in. His talent profile is just as good as the top three players. It's his situation that knocks him down to rank 7, which is the third tier, tier 1C.
And don't forget, Mr. Trey Lance likely to take over at quarterback this year. So who knows if he's going to be stealing rushing opportunities or touchdown opportunities around the goal line. So a lot to look into in San Francisco.
Well, and just the quarterback quality of play. Like, I think at a minimum, you just have to say that we don't know what the hell Trey Lance is going to be. And the outcome could be really bad. I guess the beauty is that if he stumbles, we at least know that Jimmy G can step in and stabilize it, assuming that they don't move him. But to your point, like the quarterback, ADP and that I'm looking at my formula, min-ifs, but anyway, that's not, it should be low. It should be higher than that. Trey Lance is going a little bit higher. Oh no, sorry. No, it's 15. It's right. I was looking at Tyreek Hill, which is 17 for Tua, and that is correct. So anyway, even though it's kind of blue, that's why also dropping in, the dropbacks per game. But to your point, like the quality of the quarterback play is a major question. And we've got an offense that's going to want to run the ball a lot. And if Trey Lance plays, guess what? The amount of times the 49ers run the ball is going to go up. The teams that end up running the ball the most every year are the teams that have the quarterbacks that can run the ball.
Yeah, no question. In that same tier with Deebo Samuel is Tyreek Hill. Now, he just got paid, and Tyreek Hill last year, overall wide receiver 6, averaged 18.5 points per game with Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Well, you don't quite have Patrick Mahomes anymore. You've got Tua Tagovailoa, who, if you put a tweet out about him, will blow up your Twitter account, as it did for me about a week ago. So people want to know, even in our chat room, can Tua sustain two high-end fantasy assets like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle? Now, we know, we like to poke fun at Tua and his arm. Tua is not a guy who's going to push the ball down the field. And people could say, oh, but look at his rank in terms of, deep passing, blah, blah, blah. That's not what he does. If you only throw it 3 times a game, of course, you're going to have possibly a better outcome than a guy who does it 20 times a game in terms of percentage. But this is the question now, Dwayne. Tyreek Hill in this offense, new scheme in Miami, new quarterback, elite weapon on the other side. Can Tyreek Hill bring you value just like he used to in Kansas City if you're investing a 2nd-round pick on him?
Yes, he can bring you value. And again, you got to remember this year, everything's relative to all the players that are going below Tyreek Hill. So what you have to look at, he's the same as Debo. He is in an offense that's probably going to run the ball more. You've got Mike McDaniels going to the Dolphins. He's going to try to deploy more of an attack that's going to look like what the 49ers did. But there is some range on that, right? We don't know exactly where that will be. Right now, I have the Dolphins passing the ball slightly more than the 49ers, but I could be a tad low on where the Dolphins are throwing the ball. Game scripts play a role in that, but right now they're projected to win 9 games. So I'm projecting that they're not going to be trailing a ton all the time, which can drive up pass rates. I've got them pretty much sitting, neutral in the way that I'm thinking about how often that they'll be trailing versus leading in these games. But to answer your question, like he can, but the way he's going to have to do it is going to have to be through efficiency. Now, the good news is like he grades blue across the board: target share, targets per route run, yards per route run, targets, touchdowns per route run. All these things look good. And we know that this is just last year. It was a 4.0 yards after the catch, but we've seen Tyreek be an even better player than that. And he's going to be in a scheme now that emphasizes yards after the catch. And so where he's going to have to come through to really pay off his ADP, he's not going to probably have a chance at 150 targets. Where he's going to have a chance is on 125, 130 targets, really putting up more of a Debo type performance, right? Really high efficiency. And so Tyreek Hill can do that. You're not going to get the raw volume though, because of the style of offense. And, he's got 2 other teammates going, one going in the top, Jalen Waddle's going in the top Jalen Waddle's going in the top 13 on FFPC right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also have Mike Gesicki going inside the top 12 right now at tight end. So there are 3 Dolphins vying for these targets. And I think that Hill and Waddle will separate from Mike Gesicki. So without us getting deep into Mike Gesicki, basically his underlying metrics tell us that he is what he is at this point in his career. It's not really going to go up. So I think you'll be fine seeing a 25%-ish type target share to Tyreque Hill and probably a similar target share to Jalen Waddle. And they're going to lead the team. They're probably going to have up to half of the targets, but they're going to have to live on efficiency. So they have less outs to performing big like the players we've talked about in front of them because of the team environment that they are dealing with.
And if you want team-by-team breakdowns, Dwayne and Ian Hartitz over at PFF are going to be doing individualized team-by-team fantasy breakdowns. God bless you two for doing 32 of those. So if you want just a Miami-centric one, I'm sure it's on the calendar for some point in the next few weeks, Dwayne. Well, who are you up to now? What teams have you done?
We have done the NFC. We've done the NFC East, or Ian and I. When I say we, Ian and I, yeah, we're finishing up the NFC East this week, and then last week we did the AFC East, and then next week we'll be going back over to the NFC. We haven't decided which.
So the Dolphins are already in the can. So go look for that. The PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. So now we're through Tier 1. We're in,
and just like in the chat, Toronto Dave is saying he doesn't like to bank on efficiency as much, and so yeah, this stuff is all weighted. You're going to care more about the ability to create targets. That matters more than a player's efficiency. However, wide receiver yak is pretty sticky. Explosive play rates are sticky. So and players, wide receivers typically own their ADOT. Quarterback can influence it, but the pecking order of ADOT, meaning the player that's going to be used furthest down the field. So like last year, Jared Goff left, Matt Stafford came in. What happened to all the ADOTs for the Rams? The pecking order still basically played out the way we would have thought, who would be the highest versus the middle versus the lowest, but everybody got like a 1.5 yard boost almost in ADOT just by having Matt Stafford. So when you think about players, you think about what they own, what kind of things are sticky. Those are the only sort of things we're talking about as far as their efficiency. But like the bigger thing is the ability to create targets. That definitely matters more.
So we're not going to cover every player in the top 36 here. You can go to Dwayne's article and read that, but I just want to highlight a few guys as now we get into your second tier. We'd be much remiss if we didn't talk about Mr. AJ Brown, who on draft night was dealt to my Eagles. Now he's going to go to Philly. He's going to play with his buddy Jalen Hurts, who we know last year the Eagles did not want to throw the football. They took the ball out of Hurts' hands. If you look at the stats in terms of targets, Devonta Smith, who led the team, had, it was miserable. You cannot sustain wide receiver 1 type numbers with getting 6 targets a week. And that's where Devonta Adams was for the good part of the second half of the year after they fundamentally changed their offense after week 8. They're going to try to throw the football more here. You don't go out and trade for AJ Brown, pay him all that money, and then think you're going to run the ball 35 times a week again. So AJ Brown in Philadelphia, Dwayne, you've got him in this tier with T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, Jalen Waddle. Gun to your head, you got to pick one of these 4 guys. Which one are you pulling the trigger on?
Oh, T. Higgins. I'm not as sold as you are on the fact that this just means the Eagles are going to throw a lot. And Nick Sirianni has actually come out and
they're going to try to throw a hair more. If it goes sideways, they're going to keep running the rock.
But people, they take that and they get confused. Number one, when you have a quarterback that runs the ball a lot, guess what? Your team tends to run the ball more. We've already talked about that. And so that's going to happen with Jalen Hurts. I think to your point, yes, they are going to try to throw the ball more than that. But I hear a lot of folks wanting to point back to the first 4 weeks of last year when the Eagles were they're dropping back to pass 72% of the time. They were one of the highest, right? But they were losing. And so what do coaches do? They're going to gravitate to what it was that was helping them win. Now, adding AJ Brown, I think, does mean you're going to want to throw the ball a little bit more. However, if you're looking at, the handy dandy chart that we have up, where does AJ Brown win? He wins in his ability. So his 19% target share doesn't sound good, but think of all the games where AJ Brown gets knocked out. He gets knocked out of the game. And so if you narrow that down to targets per route run, and this is where targets per route run can really be helpful, 29% of the time when he's in a route, he gets targeted last year. And if you go back and look at the games where he was at least available for 79% of the team's dropbacks, he averaged 16.3 fantasy points per game rather than the 13.9 that show up just by doing the rough math, right? Looking at, okay, here's what he scored in the games he played. But that's not really the context we need. We want to know, what did he score per game in the games that he was able to actually finish, where he was actually able to, be healthy and be effective. So looking at that, and he averaged 31, his target share in those games where he saw at least 79% of the routes was 31%. So what does that line up with? Targets per route run at 29%. So again, just kind of trying to give people an example of where you would use target share versus targets per route run. Target share is the most important, but when you have players missing time or players with roles that could grow, then like I shift more towards targets per route run to try to project what the next season could look like. But if you look at all the rest of his metrics, yards per route run, 2.49. His explosive play rate was down a little bit, but I'm not worried about it. Like AJ Brown's an explosive player. His yak, actually, the 2 years before had been not quite Debo range, but up there. But we saw a reduction right in the amount of play action and things that were used in Tennessee last year. Some different things played into that. Injuries probably also played a role with AJ Brown. But yards after the catch, again, why it's weighted less, it's not as sticky as a player's ability to generate targets, and it can deteriorate more quickly over time. So AJ Brown, I really like. If you look at his talent profile itself is elite. It ranks up there with Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase. He's one of only 4 receivers in the league last year to have a targets per route run of 2.50 or better against man and zone coverage. The other guys to do that, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, and Devonta Adams. That's pretty freaking good company to be in. So AJ Brown is a beast, but the problem is the Eagles are going to run the ball more. You've got Devonta Smith inside the top 36 in wide receiver ADP. You've got Dallas Goedert inside the top 12 in tight end ADP. We've got a quarterback we really like at ADP, but a lot of it is tied to his ability to run. So you got to kind of take the context of the 35.9 passing attempts per game is really one of the lower ones in the league. Not as low as where we have the 49ers, not as low as where we have the Colts. So above those teams, but definitely not like it's not in a positive space. So for me, again, Brown, the route is efficiency. If he didn't have either Devonta Smith or Dallas Goedert, you could argue really he belongs in tier 1C. You could argue he does anyway, right? Because Debo is really close on borderline with Ayuk, putting him at 3 total teammates for the 49ers. He would be one of those teammates, right? Debo himself. So, I mean, you could make the argument, I think, for AJ Brown to actually go 1 tier above with Debo Samuel and Tyreek Hill. I wouldn't argue about it. But again, ADP does calculate into the model. So I'm trying to keep people from also overspending on different players as well. So, but you asked, like, who do I have first? Is T. Higgins. He's 23.7 years old, looks really good across all the metrics that we want from a talent perspective. 19% target share, 22% targets per route run, yards per route run, 2.26, has a good explosive play rate, plays in an offense that we've got projected for 39.1. Dropbacks per game in regulation, which is really good, and a quality team, projects for 10 wins, and we love the quarterback, QB5. So I like T. Higgins because I feel like I see a wider chance of the Bengals just turning into this true pass-heavy team and really supporting 2 great receivers in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins than I do AJ Brown having to overcome the fact that he's got to deal with Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert, and we need the Eagles to throw the ball more, and we need Jalen Hurts to be a better quarterback, if that makes sense. I feel that T. Higgins' path, and that's part of what also pushed AJ Brown down into this tier, is because I wanted to make sure people understood how I felt about T. Higgins as being, if I had to place a chip, I'm going to take T. Higgins above AJ Brown. They are in the same tier.
All right, you're listening to the Fantasy Football Hustle. Brian Drake, Dwayne McFarland. Make sure you're following us on Twitter. I'm at Drake Fantasy. Dwayne is at Dwayne McFarland. Have you created a TikTok yet, Dwayne?
I've created one, and I haven't put any content out.
Yeah.
So I've taken the first step. The damn app, every time I open it, just starts playing stuff. Like, I guess I'm just a boomer. Like that. Just
the
I think
worst.
We talked about that before on the show. Like, because you're in the middle of somewhere and you're like, I'll just open TikTok, and like your volume's up, it just starts blaring. Like somebody probably hit us in the DMs like we're idiots, and they're like, hey, here's how you don't do that. Here's how you better use the app. Like, fine, you won't be insulting us by telling us that over here in the chat.
Yeah, no, I'm 1,000% with you. You open it up and it's 6 girls in bikinis snorting coke at a party in Miami, and you're like, well, what am I looking at right here?
Well,
Jeez Louise.
I did not see that, but okay.
I gotta monitor, I guess, what my 2nd grade daughter's watching more than geez. So we're talking wide receivers here in the top 36 of Dwayne's rankings here. Again, we're not going to touch on every single guy. Michael Pittman's in that tier. Love Michael Pittman. I'm sure we're going to talk about him a lot.
We should probably talk about him, like, because that's
All right.
one that's like, well, I mean, look, if you look at ADP, and ADP is part of how I'm generating this, and he's still finishing in this tier. So I mean, FFPC's positional ADP is 17. I've got him ranked 11th. I think people are sleeping on Michael Pittman. The thing he lacks is really the ability to do more with the targets. So he's fine from a targets per route run. From a touchdowns per route run standpoint. He's also fine as far as his utilization in the red zone and in the end zone. It grades out well compared to other players that we know need to give us a bump in their touchdown production. But he's not the same, right, as what you're getting from some of the players like Devonta Adams and CeeDee Lamb and their yards after the catch, their explosive playmaking ability. Pittman's not on their level. However, his target share of 24% as only a second-year player and his PFF receiving grade of 79.9 only as a second-year player are really good. Yards per route run also really good. The problem is we know that the Colts want to run the ball, but he did get an upgrade with Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan throws the ball more accurately to every level of the field than Carson Wentz, not just one area or the other. The other thing is when you look at the Colts, they got the lead more than any other team in the league last year by 4 points or more. That is a fragile data point. We could easily see the Colts lead maybe 20% of plays. That what they did last year could drop by 20%. It's a really fragile piece of data. So we still know they want to be a run first team. They've built the offensive line. They've got Jonathan Taylor, but I do think there is room in this projected dropbacks per game to actually be a little better than what I'm giving them. I would still project them as what do they want to do? They want to be a run heavy team. Sorry, folks, for watching that. I keep messing this up, but they want to be a run heavy team. But I think there is room for game scripts to dictate, you know what, you're going to need to throw the ball, a little bit more. So those are the sort of things you've got to think through. What does the team want to do versus what happens when you get punched in the face? And here's the thing with the Colts. They ran the ball more than their opponent, more than the NFL average by far in every single game script, leading, close, trailing. So they're still going to be a run first team, but there is room, if that makes sense, for it to get better. But with Pittman, I mean, look, there's no other teammate going inside the top 36 receivers or top 12 tight ends. Team is projected for 9.5 wins, so that's quality. And folks wondering, like, the team projected wins and quarterback ADP, I really combined together. Quarterback ADP is to get more of a market sentiment. You do have to discount the fact that rushing is accounted for with the quarterbacks, but that putting it together with team projected wins. So one stat that correlates more highly to NFL wins in a season or win rate in a season than any other singular statistic that ties back at a player level is yards per attempt passing. Right. So typically, if you have a team that wins more, they may not always throw the ball a lot, but typically their yards per attempt, their efficiency is going to be good. And so that's where you also get a little bit of a bump for Michael Pittman. But I don't think he's getting enough love right now because when you really look at him compared to everyone else, he belongs in this tier with Waddle, AJ Brown, and T. Higgins.
In my mind, there's no bigger draft day value today than Mike Evans. Mike Evans going off in this FFPC Best Ball Slim, round 3, pick 4 on average. If you look back at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2021, no team had more passing attempts, passing completions, passing yards, passing touchdowns. By the way, Tom Brady's back. Oh, also, by the way, Chris Godwin probably won't start the season due to injury. And we don't know if Gronk's going to be there right now. So you've got, you bring in Russell Gage and a bunch of kind of ancillary pieces, and you've got this stud in Mike Evans, who we know Brady loves throwing the ball to in the end zone, loves throwing the ball to him on third down. Like, Mike Evans is going to have a monster season if he stays healthy, and you can get him at the end of the third round.
Yeah, overall, his ADP is good. I think as a wide receiver, he's overrated as far as what his ADP is positionally, right? Right now, he's the 10th wide receiver off the board. But because of what happens below him and the way some of these events have played out, and when I say below him and the tiers below, the way that the offseason has played out, it's pushing him up. Overall, though, like in a normal year, Mike Evans would grade out more like a wide receiver 18 or a wide receiver 20. He's grading out as a wide receiver 13 this year because of how bad some of the situations are for the talent behind him in these other tiers. And so my big concern with Mike Evans, number one, you mentioned all the good things that can go on for Mike Evans. But let me tell you, last year when Antonio Brown was out, and Antonio Brown is the one thing we know for sure is gone from the Bucs, right? Gronk's probably coming back. Chris Godwin, we'll have to see when he's going to be ready, but eventually he will play in the season. And so whenever you look at Mike Evans last year, his target share was 16% in games without Antonio Brown. His target share for the season was 15%. Right. So AB being gone may not necessarily be this big boon for Mike Evans. When Mike Evans went nuts is when Chris Godwin got hurt. His target share jumped to 23% per game. His PPR points jumped to 14.7, 26.9, 26.7, 25.9. Those performances in the playoffs, two of them are from the playoffs. 2 or 1. Anyway, that includes the playoffs. You need to know that. Those performances are what's driving up his ADP right now. But his underlying say this is a player that is absolutely on the decline. His yards per route run have gone down every season. His targets per route run have also gone down every season over the last 3 years. There are a lot of distressing factors right now with Mike Evans. If you were buying into Mike Evans, and you'll notice when you look at, if you're able to go look at this, he has blues, but they are not the same as the players above him or even the players in the same tier. When you look at his target share, his targets per route run, yards per route run, they are much more wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 material. The situation that you just talked about is what's pushing him up. He plays in an offense that will be one of the most pass-centric offenses in the league with an elite quarterback on a team that's projected to be of high quality with 11.5 projected wins by Vegas. So if you are a believer in buying talent and you want to fade, you want to jump the shark on getting off, you don't want to buy into a receiver that you think this could be their bust year because the talent is declining. Mike Evans is the guy you're fading. If you don't care and you think, you know what, man, the situation is really what I care more about, I would argue you have them in the wrong order, but that's your prerogative. That's why I share all this data with you guys so you can make your own decisions. Then fine, you just keep going with Mike Evans. But he's really getting pushed up the board, and I get why it's happening. When we look at the tiers below Mike Evans, you'll see, well, shit, if I'm taking a receiver at this spot, I'm probably going to have to take Mike Evans. I just want to warn people, this is not the same Mike Evans we knew 4 years ago. Like it's the game's going to be called on him pretty soon. Like he's going to hit the cliff, and it could be this year.
Well, hey, I'm still buying into him with Tom Brady, with maybe we get Godwin on the PUP. And again, we don't know about Gronk versus, who's below him? We got Deontay Johnson with Mitch Trubisky, DJ Moore with you and I playing quarterback, DK Metcalf, forget about it. He's got a high school kid playing quarterback there. Terry McLaurin's
bigger
got
question
Carson
you're going to
Wentz.
face with Mike Evans is not so much these guys, and you're right. Like that's what I was just saying. The tiers below are what's pushing Mike Evans up, not Mike Evans. But the bigger question you're going to face is positional. Do I take a tight end I love instead of Mike Evans? Abso-freaking-lutely, I will. Do I take a running back I really like if I have him even with Mike Evans? I absolutely will take the running back over Mike Evans. If you're stuck and you feel it has to be receiver, and that's the way the board is falling, that's when you're going to go ahead and pull the trigger on Mike Evans.
Yeah, I mean, if you get him, what do we say his Mike Evans ADP is here? Mike Evans 3-4, so you're getting him as your second receiver or whatever. I can live with that. Let's keep bopping around here. Cherry pick a couple other guys. All right, let's talk about quickly DK Metcalf, the situation in Seattle with Drew Lock at quarterback. I mean, that's a disaster. I want no part of anything to do with this Seattle offense if those are going to be the quarterbacks out there. I mean, you wouldn't win, 4 games in the SEC this year with Drew Lock as your quarterback.
Yeah, man. So these, the name of this tier, ascending players we love and offenses that make us quiver in fear because we love the players, look at their target shares, their targets per route run, their yards per route run. Look at their yak. Look at, for some of these guys, their ability to work all levels of the field, like, dude, it's phenomenal. But then when you look at Deontay Johnson and the Steelers, their offense is going to change. Ben's gone. They're not going to throw the ball 70% of the time. That's not what Matt Canada wants to do. They also have two quarterbacks, whether it's Trubisky or whether it is Kenny Pickett, they're going to need to prop them up and try to win with efficiency, not just dropping back and throwing the ball all the damn time. So 36 projected dropbacks per game is not great. And we have quarterback questions. For the first time in how long are the Steelers projected to be under an 8-win team at 7.5 by Vegas? Quarterback ADP, the minimum, is pick 30. I believe that's still Trubisky. It might be. My formula is set up to go grab the guy that's being drafted earliest by each team. I do believe it is still Trubisky, but it might have flipped over to Pickett now. But either way, that's a challenge. And we already talked about, with Ben, the short intermediate timing game. That's where Deontay that's where he would shine. Is it going to be the same with Mitch Trubisky? Look, Deontay's talent profile is amazing. 27% targets per route run, 25% target share, yards per route run, 1.89, despite dealing with a quarterback who was clearly beyond on his last leg. Right. Yak, ability to do stuff after the catch, like Deontay, man, great player. Same thing for all these. DJ Moore, DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin. The issue is the environment that they're sitting in. It is just really scary. You could argue Terry belongs at the top of this tier. And the reason why is, even though we don't love Carson Wentz, like Carson Wentz is better than Drew Lock or Geno Smith. It's better than Sam Darnold. And it's arguably going to be better than any kind of upside we could think we might be able to bank on out of the Steelers. That one I think is a little more arguable, but I think you could easily say, and look, Wentz is not good, folks. His accuracy stinks. Like, it's terrible on all levels of the field, on all types of throws. And it's not just from last year. It's been this way for some time now, and it's part of his struggle. So that's the biggest thing, that's a concern. But I think you could easily argue that McLaurin, because everything else is similar, right? The team projected wins are all really close. The quarterback ADPs are really close, but Wentz is slightly above. Projected passing attempts per game, better for the Panthers, better for the Commanders. None of these, Deontay's got the most target competition. The other guys, they're the only players from their teams that are top 36 wide receiver ADP or top 12 tight end ADP. So great talents. Offenses scare us to freaking death for multiple reasons.
Let's move on to another tier here. And there's some
that one's too depressing for you, that tier.
I even had a whole tweet about Terry McLaurin and Wentz throwing to X receivers. Go to my Twitter, you can read about it. I can't talk about Carson Wentz more. It's going to throw off my golf game for later today. I have to relive Carson Wentz memories. But this is a super interesting group of wide receivers we have here, and I'll cherry pick a few. You've got names like Judy, Godwin, Hollywood Brown, Mike Williams, Cortland Sutton, Michael Thomas. Again, we don't know if Michael Thomas, what he's going to do this year, but the name that pops out to me here, Dwayne, is Marquis Hollywood Brown with the Cardinals. New team. He's with Kyler Murray, who we know is very good at throwing the deep ball. We're not going to have DeAndre Hopkins for the first 6 weeks. Christian Kirk is out of town. So now, this is the Hollywood Brown show. Also, by the way, if you want a super deep pick in ADP or an underdog, Antoine Wesley. Take him with your last pick in the draft. He's going to be starting at X. He's going to get a boatload of targets. We'll save that for one of our drafts we do. Use promo code HUSTLE.
Because I will say the opposite. Do not draft Antoine Wesley. We'll have to go head to head.
Watch, because your first 6 weeks, you're going to be like, oh my God, this guy's like, our week one waiver wire show. We're going to be talking about Antoine Wesley as a guy to pick up because he's going to be starting at X.
Men bid him.
All right, well, we'll see.
We'll get to that.
We got to get Drew Davenport and Ian on here. They have a tremendous story about Antoine Wesley, who if Ian would have picked him up and started him in a championship or semifinal game in the Kings Classic, he would have won the championship, but he didn't. And then Drew ended up winning it. It's a whole story. We'll drink about that out in Canton. But let's go back to Hollywood Brown here, because he was pretty good with an offense who didn't throw the football in Baltimore. Now he's going to a team, all they want to do is throw the football, and he's now the de facto first target for Kyler Murray. So I'm big into Hollywood Brown. What are your thoughts on him this year?
Yeah, I really like him. I'm above consensus on FFPC. I'm slightly behind right now on Underdog. So Underdog, he's at ADP of 18, FFPC 24. So at the position of wide receiver, I have him ranked 21st. But yeah, I like him. And honestly, this tier, I toyed with just flipping with the tier above. And so I wanted to finish working through my team projections first and then come back to it. I still may do it. I think so with this tier, and I'm just going to scroll back up a little bit for anybody following along on YouTube. You can see the talent level is not the same. is what we just talked about with Deontay
The upside's
Johnson,
way
DJ
higher,
Moore, DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin. Actually, no. The bigger driver to upside is player talent than player situation. But with some of these guys, it's so close. Specifically, a guy that you pick being Marquis Brown. And so this is the reason I haven't flipped it yet, is because the actual data says I shouldn't, but like my gut says that I should. And so there's a balance to these things. And that's why I'm not beholden just to one output that comes out across all of these. Like, you still want to have like the ability to work through this and have a process. But all the guys in this tier, Jerry Jeudy and Marquis Brown, Mike Williams, are all there because they've flashed in the past. They've never necessarily been consistent. Chris Godwin would be above this tier, but he's in it because he may start the year hurt. Michael Thomas is in this tier because we don't know what's going to happen with his injury, but if we were just looking at his ability to demand targets, it's been in the 30% range in the past, right? But he's coming off of an injury, so we don't have him as high. But as far as Marquis Brown, you picked the perfect one because target share 23% last year, targets per route run 22%. And if you look, at Brown over these last couple of years, he's had a 24% and a 23% adjusted target share. So that's adjusting for games missed. And then whenever you look at his targets per route run, they've gotten better every year, 21% or 20% to 21% to 22%. And so there are a lot of good things to like about, Marquis Brown. You talked about his ability to start fast. So yeah, he's definitely a player that I feel like is going to end up, I honestly nearly tiered him in the tier above anyway. I nearly had him. I didn't want to put him in that tier though, because I'm not worried about his quarterback, right? I'm not worried about his situation. So this tier, the actual talent itself grades lower than the tier above. Even though they may be similar on a 1-year sample, I'm looking behind these data points. I'm really looking at 3 years if I can. That's what I'm trying to look for. Now, age plays a role. Like, where are they in the age and what does that do to their trajectory? That's a problem for Mike Evans, right? He's at that point where the cliff could hit. So just saying it's guaranteed Mike Evans is going to hit. We're actually at the point in career talent arcs where he, could start to fall off, and we've already seen it in his underlying data. But yeah, Marquis Brown, man, I do absolutely love. He's a player that I want really high exposure to. I think, eventually you're going to get DeAndre Hopkins back. But Hopkins, man, is kind of in that same bucket as Mike Evans. If Hopkins had not been, suspended, and we knew he was going to be healthy for the start of the season coming off the MCL, he would have graded in the same tier as Mike Evans and Keenan Allen. That's where he would have graded because of the same thing. His underlying data points are deteriorating, not as consistently as what we saw with Mike Evans. We haven't seen it 3 years in a row. We just saw him kind of hit a cliff last year. And there's a caveat really for DeAndre Hopkins. And the fact is, he played with injuries all season. He hurt his shoulder in week 2. He gutted it out, didn't practice, played the next 2 games. Then he came back, immediately strained his hamstring, worked his way back from that, and came back and tore up his MCL. So we don't really have hardly any healthy snaps on record for DeAndre Hopkins last year. And the way DeAndre wins is more as a possession receiver, right? It's not really as a player that's going to create all these explosive plays. So the player archetypes also play a role. So I'm less concerned about Hopkins falling off the cliff than I am Mike Evans based on the underlying data points, but that's where he would have tiered. So the problem that you get with Brown is late in the season, he could fade some. Right. The problem you get with Mike Evans is in the money weeks when you're trying to win your league championships. Guess who's going to be on the field? Chris Godwin's going to be out there and be playing at a high level by that point. Right. Most likely. Now, he could get hurt again. There's things that could happen, compensatory injuries. Same thing, same challenge you're facing with Marquis Brown. By the time you're in it at the end, trying to just hit really big to win, Best Ball Mania 3, all these sort of things, by that time, DeAndre Hopkins will be a factor. But by then it could be too late. Marquis Brown, has played with Kyler Murray before in college, and he is a major upgrade over Christian Kirk. Make no doubt about it. Marquis Brown, even if he just plays Christian Kirk's role, is going to be really good.
Here's the play in season long. You already know what I'm going to say. You draft Marquis Brown, you play him the first 5 weeks, and then before the inevitable swoon comes, because the coach always falls off a cliff at the end of the season, you trade his ass for a high-end running back, and then you rock and roll from there. So let's jump down to a very interesting tier. Your wide receivers 25 through 29. A lot of very, very young players here. The name that jumps out to me is Darnell Mooney of the Bears. The Bears just seemingly don't want to help Justin Fields and give him much help on the outside. They lost Allen Robinson. So now you've got Darnell Mooney. You've got some 38-year-old rookie that they drafted in Velus Jones. You got a bunch of other scrubs. We've got Cole Kmet at wide receiver, at tight end, excuse me. But Darnell Mooney, if this target share, Dwayne, is there, I mean, Jesus, he's got to throw the ball to somebody. And why not Darnell Mooney? I mean, Darnell Mooney is not an A. He's not like, a guy you look at and you go, this guy's my ex. He's a badass. He's Des Bryant. He's not that guy. But if he's all you got for fantasy, that might be pretty good for your third receiver.
Yeah, and I think the big part of what's holding Mooney down in ADP is people just they're so concerned with his draft capital. But we've already seen it for 2 seasons now. So the way I look at this tier, and this is for those just listening, to the pod that can't see, this is the first tier and the sub tier in my tier 3 of receivers. So this is called 3A. And so 3A is really based on players that have flashed in the areas we care about as far as talent, because we care about talent the most. And so target share, you've got Elijah Moore, Darnell Mooney, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Gabriel Davis, and Drake London are in this tier. And we're talking right now about Darnell Mooney. And so when you think about this tier, one easy way to think about it, this is an arbitrage tier on tier 2C. It's very similar, right? The Jets, the Bears, the Lions, the Falcons, all we have concerns about how good their offense is going to be. Vegas has concerns about how good their offense is going to be. Those teams are projected for 5.5, 6.5, 6.5, and 5 wins. They're projected to suck. Their quarterback ADPs are not good. 29, 25, 19, 22. So they all fit very similarly to what we see with Deontay Johnson, DJ Moore, DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin above. However, the ADP that you're getting on this group of players is much better. You could make an argument that if I was, and this would happen actually, if I was not calibrating the way I'm thinking about these things, part of it coming back to ADP, these guys would all be in one big tier together. So the way I think about this tier is it's arbitrage plays on those guys that you're having to take earlier that we like their talent. Now this group, the thing is they haven't consistently shown it the way that we've seen Deontay Johnson, DJ Moore, DK Metcalf, and Terry McLaurin. They have all shown it over multiple seasons now, right? We've got a shorter track record with this group. So that's the other difference that keeps them in a separate tier. So yeah, like when I look at this, I'm much more comfortable trying to take upside swings on this tier because the ADP is so much better on a similar group of players to what we have in tier 2C.
Darnell Mooney on the FFPC is a 7th round pick. So the guys you're looking at here, you're mostly looking end of 6th, 7th, 8th round for a lot of these players. So it's not like it's a major investment. So if he's your
and
third
they really
receiver,
do all tier together. They all tier together for different reasons, right? And again, that's the beauty. You guys should go check this out over on PFF. So Darnell Mooney, absolutely, if we looked at it, said he's got the best chance to get them, he has the least target competition of this entire group, right? He's got the least. But his offense is, but his offense, right? You got to take everything into account, like his projected team wins. What do we think about his quarterback? What do we think about how often the Bears are going to drop back and throw the ball? It's bringing all those things together so you don't just get hung up on target competition, which is important, but it's just one piece. So these guys, I'm taking equal shots on all of these. The one guy that's different in this tier than the other 4 we've named is Gabriel Davis. Gabriel Davis has not done what these other guys have done on a target share level or a targets per route run rate, right? However, his explosive play rate at 28% is one of the best. And this is excluding playoffs. When you go to playoffs, it gets even better. His deep target rate is 25%. And he is in an offense that we absolutely love, projected to drop back to pass 42 times per game, win 11.5 games, and has the number 1 QB ADP. So Gabriel Davis, and again, this is why I love doing these this way. Gabriel Davis makes it into this tier for totally opposite reasons of Elijah Moore, Darnell Mooney, and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Drake London. He has not shown the same things as far as his pedigree for talent on things that are sticky that make us think that a player is going to be really great. Here's what I'll say with Gabriel Davis. If I were to include his expanded data set and include the playoffs, which I do in the back end, I want to look at that. I don't show it in the tables that I share with people because then it becomes confusing. One player I'm looking at, I get playoffs. The other I don't, right? And people get kind of twisted about it. But at the end of the day, like if you're looking at Gabe Davis and you're looking at, let me pull this up for folks real quick. Boom. Let's pull this back up. Well, so if you're looking at Gabe Davis and you really want the full picture, Drake, you're looking at basically in week 14, through the second week of the playoffs, notice what his routes did. He actually was in a full-time role. So it makes sense to want to take a look at, okay, Gabe Davis was in a full-time role last year. They didn't really do anything on this team that makes me think he won't be on the field for this many routes. Before week 14 through the playoffs, and this isn't an exact way to average.
No, they just added a couple slot receivers, really.
But he averaged basically, and this isn't the exact math, this is me just doing it, a quick on the fly, 34% of the routes. But if you look at him over those games we're talking about, he averaged 84% of the routes. And then start looking at his PPR points, 15-3, 25-5, 7-0, 6-9, 12-1, and a 52.1. I'll hear people all the time, you got to throw the 52.1 out. Do I? Do I have to throw it out? We don't throw it out for T. Higgins. We don't throw Jamar Chase's 50-point game out. Now, look, I'm not saying he's the same pedigree as those guys, but we've already covered that. That's baked into targets per route run. That's baked into target share. I don't need to take that away from Gabriel Davis to say he's not T. Higgins or that he is not Jamar Chase. That is already inherent, right, in the research that we're doing. So, people have got to stop this crap of wanting to take away a player's best game. I think what you saw from Gabriel Davis in that game against the Bengals in the playoffs and what Josh Allen did is a case for his boom weeks. Is he going to do that? He probably won't have another game that good in his career, but is he going to have 2 touchdown games? Probably. Could he have a 3 touchdown game? He could have one. So, I think people need to be careful with just isolating and saying, I just don't want to include that part, into my analysis. So with Gabe Davis, again, it's all about the situation that he's in. And if you just look again at when he was on the field, he was averaging a 20% targets per route run over those games where he was actually on the field more. So even if you project Gabe Davis, you're like, man, his profile doesn't really look as good as these other guys. He doesn't have the draft pedigree. All true. But again, already all freaking baked into what we're talking about here. What you have to acknowledge is if he's on the field more, he's going to run more routes. And even if he does not improve in targets per route run, say he stays static to what he did last year, even before he got the full-time role at 18%, but you add on all those routes, he's going to have way more targets just without even getting better. So that's what you have to take into your range of outcomes. And obviously I bake a case where he takes a step back, right? Where maybe he drops down to 16% targets per route run. But Gabe Davis, I was avoiding at all costs ahead of the draft because I thought, there's a good chance the Bills draft someone that could really knock him off his pedestal, but they didn't. I love Khalil Shakir, but he's a 5th round pick. I like his draft profile other than his draft pedigree, but he also looks more like a slot receiver based on what he did in college, right? So I feel good about Gabe Davis. And I think the other thing you have to admit to yourself, right, is there is some range in his outcome, right? There's some percentile that when he gets to X percentile in his range of outcomes, he has a 24% targets per route run. Then what happens? In a top pass offense, as far as dropbacks, a top pass offense as far as quarterbacks, right? And all of a sudden now he's getting maybe 2% or 3% less than what we see from Stephon Diggs, but they really become the main 2 guys in the offense. Like Gabriel Davis, if that happens, he's going to be a top 18 receiver. And it is in the range of outcomes. Am I saying that it's at his 60th percentile? No. But at his 20th percentile, it's definitely becoming in play. His 80th percentile.
Somebody who was a top 18 wide receiver last year is in your next tier, and it's Brandon Cooks of the Houston Texans. He finished last year as wide receiver 16. He averaged a healthy 15 points per game. He has another year with Davis Mills, who should always be your favorite late round quarterback in best ball. And boy, oh boy, you look at where people are taking Brandon Cooks compared to what he actually does on the field. He's wide receiver 29. People are taking Juju ahead of him. DeAndre Hopkins, who's missing, 6 games. Michael Thomas, we don't know if he's going to play this year. Why is everyone still sleeping on the very good Brandon Cooks? You're going to put him on your team. You get him as your wide receiver 3. And look, he's putting up high-end wide receiver 2 numbers for the season.
Yeah, when you look at his target share, 24%, targets per route run, 25%, yards per route run, 1.96, it really looks like a lot of receivers further up. The thing that's really pulling this tier down, notice age is starting to become a factor, right? Everybody in this tier, DeAndre Hopkins, Allen Robinson, Amari Cooper, Brandon Cooks, 30.3, 29.1, 28.2, and 29.0 years old going into this season. And so knowing the way that, some of the performance models work, you have to start accounting for a little bit of a decline. And so that's why you're getting the discount on Brandon Cooks, but I love his ADP. I've got him ranked 33rd. His FBC is 29. His underdog is 30. I'm very on board with taking Brandon Cooks in this range. Amari Cooper really profiles more of a similar way, slightly younger, and people are taking him way ahead. Right now, people are taking Amari Cooper at pick 19. Like, I've got him ranked as my number 32 receiver. Look, guys, Amari Cooper has had how many opportunities to take over a passing game? And on offenses where it wasn't super crowded, he's not been able to. He's a great route runner. He's not as good after the catch as what he used to be. He doesn't win down the field as often on deep throws as some of the other elite players. His explosive play rate, is nice, but he can't win in all the different ways that we've seen a lot of these other guys, which is why historically, like over Amari's career, like he's a 20 to 22% target per route guy. Like, so expecting him to all of a sudden be a 26 or a 25%er because he's on the Browns, I think it's faulty thinking. I think it's faulty logic, because we've seen guys that have not been able to do it by this point in their career. So that's the other thing. We kind of know what these guys are, and it's not a bad thing, but they don't hold the upside. They also don't hold the floor, right, as the tier in front of them. These guys are a better floor than the tier we just talked about. They have slightly less upside. And a lot of that, again, comes back to when we know players break out, right, in their age and experience ranges. We know what the guys we just talked about are. There's still a chance Amon-Ra St. Brown, Elijah Moore, Gabriel Davis, Darnell Mooney, Drake London, there's a chance these guys go nuts, right? They're still within that range in their age and experience that they're in the sweet spot for that still to happen for them, if that makes sense. But when you're drafting, notice, like, these are all tier 3 players. We talked about 3A, and now we're talking about 3B. So based on your roster construction and what you're doing, let's say maybe you did early on swing on tier 2C, Drake, and you went ahead and you said, screw it, I like Deontay Johnson, man. Like, his profile is there. I'm not going to touch DK Metcalf, but Dwayne, I love Deontay Johnson. I'm going to go ahead and take him. Great. Whenever you get down here to this range, you may feel like, you know what, I took Deontay Johnson before. What's my risk tolerance? Do I want to take on more upside with Elijah Moore, but also potentially a worse floor? We've only seen one season. Or I just want to grab Brandon Cooks here, right? Like, that can be the way you think about your roster construction and your strategy. Some of you are going to say, nope, I want to keep it pegged. I want to keep the speedometer just like pegged the whole way. I'm going with another upside player. I'm going to try to be a year early on being off of some of the older receivers. Great. That's up to you. But at the end of the day, like, Brandon Cooks is going to project really well, even being in a bad offense, because of how well that he's played.
The final tier we're going to talk about here, 3C, as Devonta Smith of the Eagles, Rashad Bateman of the Ravens, and Treylon Burks, who's going to be replacing A.J. Brown with the Tennessee Titans. The guy who obviously jumps off the page here to me is Rashad Bateman, Dwayne, who is now the alpha wide receiver in the Ravens offense. Gone is Marquis Brown and his 146 targets. Hollywood Brown caught 91 balls, folks, last year. He was a 1,000-yard receiver. Now, here comes Rashad Bateman again. Remember, he was injured. And, he didn't get to play in all the games, only had 12 appearances. He played in 12 games last year. 68 targets, 48 catches, and 1 touchdown. That's got to all change. There's no other Sammy Watkins. There's nothing else here. It's Rashad Bateman, it's Mark Andrews. I mean, geez Louise, unless they run it like it's a freaking Army-Navy game, Dwayne, this guy has to have a much better season.
Yeah, and the question that you're looking at with Bateman, how much of last season was impacted by injuries, right? He got hurt early out of the gate. He was a little dinged up, but overall, if we look at his targets per route run, his target share, you can say, 11%. Well, he missed games. He had to deal with 2 other receivers. But targets per route run, also not so great. Okay, 16%. So that's just the time he's on the field, right? So we're just holding him accountable for when he was actually out there and able to earn a target. Didn't do very well. 1.26 yards per route run. Also not very good. What I will say is he just met a threshold for his PFF receiving grade, which I really like to look at for rookies based on some work that I saw from Jacob Sanderson and actually from, Fantasy Bean Counter. Drew. Out on Twitter. You guys can go check his stuff out, but it's I believe it's at FB Bean Counter, but he does some really cool stuff, a lot of dynasty stuff. Like, I love his research. And so some things I've been looking at that he was doing that I was trying to integrate into some of my process. So hitting that 65.2 grade, like, you'd much rather be a 75, right? So Elijah Moore nearly hit the 75. Amon-Ra St. Brown blew it out with an 80. That's why I love Amon-Ra St. Brown so much, even though he's going to have more target competition. But when you look at Rashad Bateman, he did just make the cutoff, the 65 to 75. If you were also a first-round pick, 9 out of 10 of those players did go on ending up hitting in year 2 or year 3 to have a top 24 wide receiver finish. So is it going to be this year? Is it going to be next year? I don't know, but there's a 90% hit rate. To your point, it seems like this should be the year that we think that it could go ahead and happen. Now he's got to do his part. Like he's got to play better than what he did last year. So yeah, I still love the ADP though. I love where we're getting him. And yeah, like all the things that you just said, Devonta's got to deal with Goddard and AJ Brown. Right. Rashad Bateman's really just got to deal with Mark Andrews. And they're projected for similar drop back rates.
I would never draft Devonta Smith this year. And you guys all know me as the huge Eagles homer. To me, you're never going to get return on that investment unless AJ Brown gets hurt. Because Goddard, if he's healthy, they're paying him a ton of dough and he's going to get targets. AJ Brown's going to get fed like you've never seen. Well, Devonta Smith, is great a technician as he is running around, and now he can play off the line. He doesn't have to play the X spot. He can play the Z. He can move around inside. He's not going to see the targets. He's going to see 4 targets a week. So
maybe, but the number one driver to targets is talent, not situation, not the other players on your team. So
their scheme in their situation could be the number one driver.
Yeah, but calculating scheme and managing that, it's baked in. Like that's the beauty of this, right? He's got the same dropbacks per game, right, as what AJ Brown and the other guys do. Quarterback ADP's baked in. Quality of team, 8.5 wins. It's baked in. ADP of his teammates is baked in, which is the only thing that pushes him down to this low. Like his talent screams he should be in tier 2. His situation screams he should be in tier 3. So I think everything you said is right, Drake. But why
I'm putting that on a t-shirt, by the way.
Why I did the model this way was to try to be careful to avoid doing those things, because I was guilty of doing it in the past. I would be like, man, there's no way Devonta Smith is going to hit. What we also have to have is like some humility in that, weird freaking shit happens when the NFL season happens. Right? Whether it's an injury to AJ Brown, whether it's Devonta Smith just being a better badass than what we thought. Oh, by the way, he cleared the 75 PFF rookie receiving grade I talked about, 20% target share, 20% targets per route run, 1.77 yards per route run, deep target rate of 35%, explosive target rate of 25%. Devonta Smith's a badass. Like he's a really good player. And so what you don't want to do is talk yourself into thinking we can be so right and crisp on projections. 1, because we could just be wrong in them. Number 2, stuff happens, right? The Eagles could change their offense, right? AJ Brown could take a step back for some reason. He could play with injury. He doesn't even have to miss the whole season. There's a lot, Dallas Goedert could get hurt. There are a lot of paths to wanting to bet on Devonta Smith's talent. Like once you get down into this range, again, back to what you mentioned, the one sentence that I had, right? We want the ultimate is we want these kind of receivers. Guess what? There's like 5 of them. And then everyone after that is some variation of these other things. And you never, ever, ever want to discount talent too much, which is why I have Devonta Smith above Juju Smith-Schuster in the next tier. Juju Smith-Schuster is also a wide receiver 3. He's in the wide receiver 3, but he's in tier 3D. Right? I put him below the other veteran tier of Hopkins, Allen Robinson, Amari Cooper, Brandon Cooks, and I have him below them because those guys, their underlying metrics are all still good. Juju Smith-Schuster has been in an absolute freaking free fall since his breakout season. His targets per route run have gone down every year. His yards per route run have gone down every year. His PFF receiving grade has gone down every year. Everything about Juju Smith-Schuster has gotten worse. He's not good at creating a lot on his own, not a very explosive player. All he has is Patrick Mahomes and projected dropbacks per game from the Chiefs. At this point, I do not think we can continue to say Juju Smith-Schuster is talented because he's 26 years old. He's been declining for 3 straight years, right? At some point, you just kind of have to call it what it is. And so when I look at Devonta Smith, he's an ascending talent. I'm worried about his offense, right? Juju Smith-Schuster, a descending talent where I like his offense. If I have to, I'm still going to put my chip on the talent. Now, if someone wants to disagree with that, I'm totally good with it. Like, again, they're both wide receiver 3s. And so you can take this information that I'm sharing with you. I have it weighted a certain way that I'm driving my ranks. But if you want to be like what you just said, Drake, screw that. I don't want Devonta Smith. I'm really, really worried about, the quality of targets. I get it, but you just have to know it's all calculated. It's already baked into the way these guys are tiered. But if you want to go with Juju or you want to go with an Adam Thielen, and Thielen's a little separate, like his underlying metrics are also declining every single year, but they're better than Juju's, but he's age 32, right? He's not age 26. So he's in that same tier. 3D, which wraps up really all of the wide receiver threes. So that's the way it works, but you have the flexibility to apply it the way you want for your draft.
Folks, I hope you enjoyed this kind of look at Dwayne's top 36. Again, go over to pff.com, use promo code HUSTLE, sign up for a subscription, get one of those PFF Edge subscriptions. You can find Dwayne's tiers. He's going to help you draft this season. And of course, we're going to be doing that all summer long on the Hustle, doing a lot more best ball drafts with our pals over at Underdog. Use promo code HUSTLE there. And we're going to double your initial deposit up to $100. That's going to be fun, man. I'm looking forward to doing some of those Best Ball Mania 3 drafts and seeing how unique we can get to try to win $3 million.
Yeah, man, me too. And that's again, all this work we're doing now, this is designed to help us all draft well, right? And to have a clear understanding of why we have players ranked in certain spots. And you can have convictions. And even if you want to use this data differently, you still get to have your convictions. And I'm giving you the data and the freedom to make the decision still for yourself in the way that you want to feel about a player. The last thing I would leave us with. So for example, with Juju, I would much rather take Sky Moore at an ADP of 41 than Juju Smith-Schuster at an ADP of 28. We can revisit that on another day, but just food for thought.
You are channeling your inner Sigmund Bloom today, man. You're real chill. You're kind of just throwing out
the
there
mic, I guess.
Yeah. Dwayne with the new microphone, throwing out this could happen, that could happen. It's very cool. Big shout out to Sig. We got to get him back on the show. Damn it.
Yeah, for sure.
So, folks, thanks so much. We appreciate you hanging out with us. Remember to go over to YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel, search Fantasy Football Hustle. If you're listening on a podcast platform, of course, leave us a 5-star review. And we appreciate all the love that we get on social media at FF Hustle, at Drake Fantasy, and at Dwayne McFarland. So, for Dwayne, I am Drake. Hit them straight, folks, this Memorial Day week. Is it Memorial Day? Is that next weekend?
No, that's the next weekend, but it's okay. You can go ahead and start telling people to do it. I do.
Yeah, well, I'm getting ready. I got my Tiger Woods red on right now because I got my.
The Mavs lost last night, so we're just trying to get through.
Lost, got hammered by the
got destroyed,
or by the Warriors.
By Golden State. Yep.
Whew. Yeah, Warriors there. I actually tweeted about a random basketball tweet. Everyone was so out on Golden State, forgetting that for the last 2 years, Clay was hurt and Steph was banged up. They went to the finals 5 years in a row.
They're just so fun to watch. Total opposite offenses of the Mavericks, right? The Mavericks are just trying to create isolations at the top, right? And they wait the whole play clock because they're trying to find that isolation moment. And then if they drive and end up with a double, you kick out and you get that last second shot for a 3, and it drives people crazy. But man, when you watch Golden State, like their tempo is so much faster, and just the movement, how much every player is moving and constantly cutting to the basket. I'm not like this basketball savant, but like I can see the clear dichotomy between the two teams. And I'm a Mavericks fan, so I'm supporting them. But stylistically, wow, what Golden State does is just so pretty.
Oh, it's totally that high school team that has the one really good player. And then when they get to the state playoffs and they play against a team that actually has a system and moves the ball, you're like, oh, man, we don't have a chance for this. But we'll start our PFF basketball breakdown another day, folks.
Goodness, yeah.
For Dwayne, I'm Drake. Remember, folks, to never get out hustled. Take care.